So we are here again. It's In Conservation With. My name is David Lindo. I'm also known as the Urban Birder, and I welcome you all to tonight's episode, in which we have a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure that I can say that ahead of the game, with Alice Tribe, who is someone who works to protect the birds in Malta with BirdLife Malta. Am I correct in saying that, Alice?
Yes, that's correct.
So where are you and how are you?
Where am I? I'm currently actually in the BirdLife Malta office in Malta, because the Wi-Fi here is better than my home apartment Wi-Fi. And I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
No, it's a pleasure. I mean, just to let you know, Zoomers, I've known Alice for several years now. I can't remember how long, but I really admire you, Alice. I've never told you this publicly, but I've watched Alice even, sorry. I've watched Alice's career over the years, and I think you are really 150% committed. You know, I love the fact that you just said, right, I want to do this, and I'm actually going to be fighting to protect birds in sometimes very dangerous scenarios, and my full respect to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So have you spent the whole of the kind of the sort of coronavirus situation in Malta? Have you been back at all to England?
No, well, the last time I was back in England was December 2019. I was fortunate to go on a holiday before coronavirus kicked in. I was actually this time last year pretty much in Puerto Rico with my sister. But as soon as I got back to Malta, that's when coronavirus happened. So I've been here now for the last year.
Okay, let's quickly learn a bit about you, your background. You come from Reading, is that right?
Yes, so I come from Reading.
And you are a big Reading FC supporter?
Yeah, actually my mouse mat is Reading FC shirt. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that.
And how did you get into the wonderful world of nature?
You know, it's a really good question, and it's something I can't really pinpoint. If anything, I would say I was. It just came to me naturally. I have memories of me, you know, as a very young child being walked to school with my mum, and hearing robins calling and starlings, and I remember even at that age, so I was probably like 5 or 6, wondering what's making that sound, and I just had that curiosity from a young age. But I think, you know, my childhood, it was a very happy one, and my parents used to take me out to, you know, to places where there was nature, National Trust estates, for example. I just remember my parents were always very encouraging as well. I would say it's probably my parents taking me out to places where there was nature accessible. Also just having that natural instinct to, you know, be curious about the natural world and want to find out more about it.
Okay. Can you quickly give us the potted history, a very sort of truncated story of how you got yourself to be in Malta?
So when I went to university, I wasn't exactly sure the route that I wanted to take, but I knew by the time I got to university that I wanted to focus on bird conservation. And I remember following the work of BirdLife Malta, actually, even then, and just feeling really annoyed to see what was going on. And after I graduated from university, this was 2009, an internship came up at BirdLife Malta to work in the conservation team. So I actually first had my first spell at BirdLife Malta in 2010. So yeah, 11 years ago, I had a 1-year internship. And then after that, I knew that I wanted to focus on wildlife crime. And I worked in the RSPB investigations team as well for just over 3 years. And when this position came up again, it came up in 2017, I felt, you know, I wanted to come back to Malta and try, to improve the situation. So I'm back here again.
Fantastic. Okay, with no further ado, let's hear about Malta. Whilst you're getting yourself organised, I just want to say to the Zoomers that tonight, and in fact all the nights up until tonight, have been sponsored by Leica Sport Optics. So thank you very much for that. And if you want to see Alice's presentation in the best possible way, then switch, if you are on gallery view, to speaker view, and you'll get the whole glorious image on your screen.
Okay. So I'll share my screen.
You go for it.
Okay. Okay, can you see that? Okay.
We can see that, yeah.
Great. Okay. So just to begin, this talk will be on saving birds in Malta, and I will be focusing mainly on the subject of wildlife crime because that's what I primarily focus on. Just before we begin, this is actually probably one of my favorite places in Malta. This is a place known as La Crosse. In the springtime, it's particularly pretty, as you can see here with the flowers. So to start with, where is Malta? I've realized, like, when I go back to England, I sometimes have people asking me questions like, is Malta part of Spain? Is Malta part of Italy? So just to point it out on the map, Malta's actually here. It's an independent country. It's south of Sicily. It's a very tiny island. It's only 316 kilometers squared. It's an archipelago, so it's made up of a few different islands. So the main one is Malta itself. And then we have the sister island called Gozo. And in between these two, we also have Camino. Malta itself, it's only 17 miles long by 9 miles wide. So it's extremely small. But despite the small size, it's actually incredibly important for birds. And there have been about 400 species recorded in Malta alone. The national bird is seen on the bottom left here. It's the blue rock thrush. So Malta is on the central Mediterranean flyway. And Malta is very important because it acts as a stepping stone for wild birds, which make their journey between the African wintering grounds and the breeding grounds in Europe. And this picture is of marsh harriers, which are coming down to roost in an area called Gigenti. This was last September, actually, and we had about 120 marsh harriers come down to roost in this particular area. So Malta, it's a country in the European Union, which means that in order to comply to certain, it has to comply to certain European Union legislation. And the oldest piece of environmental legislation under the EU is known as the Birds Directive. And this came into place in 1979. And the whole point of the Birds Directive is to try and protect all of the species that naturally occur across the European Union countries. And in total, there's about 500 species. So it's a really important piece of legislation. But in order to do things that would otherwise go against the Birds Directive, the member states have to apply for certain derogations. And in the case of Malta, at the moment, they have 3 derogations. So the first one is the spring hunting of common quail, which has been in place since, I think, 2011. And then we have the trapping of golden plover and song thrush. And I think this has been in place since 2012. And then lastly, we have the trapping and release of finches, which actually came back last autumn, 2020. So just to go through them briefly. So the first one, as I mentioned, was the spring hunting of common quail. And Malta is the only EU country that still has a spring hunting season. And for this reason, it's highly controversial, because to shoot birds on their way to the breeding grounds, it goes against all conservation logic, basically. You're shooting birds that are the fittest individuals. These are the strongest individuals. They're probably also the ones with the most experience. So to shoot these birds on their way to the breeding grounds, it's highly contestable, and actually BirdLife Malta are 100% against spring hunting. And so a few years ago, there were 2 species that were legal to hunt, the common quail and also the European turtle dove. The European turtle dove, the population numbers have been in decline so much that the IUCN actually reclassified the species as vulnerable to extinction. Now, because of this move, the Maltese government decided to remove turtle dove from the list of species that were legal to hunt. But they didn't remove it as a ban forever. It's more just a moratorium, basically. So they're hoping that the numbers of turtle doves will increase so much that they can actually put turtle dove back on the legal list of species to hunt in the spring. So the second derogation I mentioned was the trapping of golden plover and song thrush. And these open basically in 2 different stages. So first of all, we have the song thrush season, which would open on the 20th of October, and it would close on the 31st of December. And then we have the golden plover season, which opens at the end of October and runs to the 10th of January. You can have trappers who apply just for golden plover, they might apply just for song thrush, or they might apply for both. And the use of electronic callers for fish trapping is strictly prohibited, but unfortunately it's a practice which is actually quite widespread. You would hear the sounds of golden plover quite a lot during the trapping season. And on the trapping sites, the trappers can use both plastic and live decoys. And the picture here just shows a typical trapping setup. So for golden plovers, they need quite a lot of land. They're quite wide, and they have the clap nets on the ground. And this trapper is using the plastic decoys. And the third one I mentioned was the trapping and release of finches. Again, this is highly controversial because actually the European Court of Justice ruled finch trapping as an illegal practice in 2018. But the Maltese government managed to find a loophole in this, and basically came back under the guise of a scientific study. And before this ruling, so when finch trapping was legal in 2017, for example, the use of electronic callers was illegal. But then it came back in 2020 and the use was legal. So it came back with extras on top. And the whole point of the scientific study was that trappers would catch the finches, look to see if they're ringed from other countries, and they would take the details of the ring and they would report it. And basically it would provide them knowledge on where these finches are migrating from and the population numbers of different species, and to see how many in the future they can keep. But in this particular study, they should have been releasing the birds. But we know from our field work that this actually was not happening. There were 7 species that they could trap, which were chaffinch, hawfinch, greenfinch, goldfinch, linnet, siskin, and serin. This isn't a derogation, but I need to mention it as well. So Malta has an autumn hunting season, which opens for 5 months. And this season opens on the 1st of September and it runs until the 31st of January. So the Maltese hunters have, they have about 6 months of the year where they can actually shoot birds. And on top of this, they also have the rabbit hunting season, which opens in June to August. So there's actually very few months in Malta where there's no hunting going on. So during the autumn hunting season, they can shoot 40 species from the land and 12 from sea. And the European turtle dove is only permitted to be shot during September. So I work for BirdLife Malta, and they are part of BirdLife International. BirdLife International is, they're a partnership, And basically, I think there's 121 in total. Countries across the globe will have a BirdLife partner equivalent. So in the UK, this is the RSPB. And so my job, what do I actually do? So first of all, I undertake field surveillance operations relating to illegal hunting and trapping of birds. So this could be stuff that the public may get in touch with us and they may come across stuff in the countryside and they may report it to BirdLife Malta, which we follow up. Or it could be that we check on sites that we've known in the past, maybe stuff that we found ourselves during raptor camp or spring watch, for example. So we check up on pre-existing intel. And BirdLife Malta, we also have an injured bird service where members of the public, they may be walking in the countryside and they may come across injured birds and they'll call us and we go and pick them up, take them to the vets, and then hopefully these birds will go into our rehabilitation centre. So I also assist with the running of all of that. And during the peak migration periods, which are spring and autumn, BirdLife Malta, we run 2 camps. The first is Spring Watch, and the second one is Raptor Camp. And I coordinate these volunteer camps, whereby we usually have international volunteers come over to join us. And yeah, these camps are great because we have so many volunteers who come year after year after year. We've got a particular volunteer, he's been coming since 2007 and he's never missed a single one except obviously last year because of COVID. We couldn't run it as normal. And it's really nice because these volunteers, they dedicate a period of time purely to help us with our work. So we may have people join us for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. And I try to also get the locals involved as well, but there is a bit of reluctance in Malta from the Maltese to actually really get involved, because a lot of them I speak to them and they're worried about repercussions. As I mentioned before, Malta's a really tiny country, so a lot of people know each other. Maybe someone knows a hunter or has hunters in their family. So sometimes it can be very tricky to engage Maltese people with this work. But I feel like things are changing. Friday, Saturday just gone, I held some training days to try and get people involved with the next Spring Watch. And we had quite a few Maltese people come along. So I'm hoping we'll see more Maltese people getting involved with this. So I also liaise with the police who are responsible for investigating wildlife crime. And in Malta, this unit is known as the Environmental Protection Units, or EPU for shorts. And we also provide them with the evidence of illegalities, which will hopefully result in a court case, and I will be called to testify as a witness. So, as I mentioned on my very first slide, my job isn't just investigating wildlife crime. During the summer months, we quite often get people picking up young swifts, basically, and they give the swifts to us. And if you know about swifts, you can't just leave the young ones on the floor, because the parents can no longer come down to feed them. Their biology means that once they're on the ground, they struggle to take off again. So basically during the summer months, I am a swift parent. And last summer we had about 17. So it's quite time consuming. They basically, yeah, they become part of your life. And we also release stranded shearwaters, which get stranded, unfortunately, by light pollution. So that takes up a lot of time as well. Once the youngsters fledge their nests and they get disorientated by lights. So yeah, those are just two of the other duties that I do. So going back to hunting, this graph will show you the situation over the last few years. 2020 was unfortunately a record-breaking year in terms of the numbers of protected birds that we received with shotgun injuries. you can see it's 210 compared to the year before, which was 99. So we've had over double just in 1 year. Now, you may be looking at 2015 and wondering, why is it so low then? Well, in 2015, there was actually a referendum, and the referendum was on to decide whether to stop spring hunting or not. So the Maltese actually had a chance to stop spring hunting. Unfortunately, they won. Well, the hunters won the votes by just 2,000 votes, and it was actually the island of Gozo that had the majority of the people voting yes. The majority of the people in Malta voted no, we should stop it. But so the theory was that the spotlight was on the hunters in 2015, and basically they were cleaning up their acts, not to look bad. And yeah, that's why we received only 21 birds in that year. And you'll see even 2016 was also very low, because straight after the referendum, you don't want to, you know, the public allowed you to keep a spring hunting season. So you still need to look like you're on your good behavior, basically. But since 2017, things have got worse, and they've kept on getting worse. And 2020 was a disaster, basically. And I don't know how this year will go, but I'm expecting it to be the same again, if not even worse again. So, and also in 2020, we received a few species which are very rare for us to get, because one of the main drivers for illegal hunting of these species, the protected species, is taxidermy. So something like an osprey is a bird that we would very rarely get. In fact, I think the last one BirdLife Malta received was actually in the year I was here before, 2010. So yeah, this, unfortunately, we picked this bird up in March from Gozo. And here is a peregrine that was also picked up from Gozo, and this was last August. And you can see this is a juvenile peregrine as well. So it could even be a bird that was raised in Malta, which is a real shame, because Malta does not have many successful breeding raptors because of the problem with persecution. Unfortunately, this peregrine really suffered a lot of, like you can see the left wing, it was already rotting, basically. Like there were maggots in the wound, and yeah, unfortunately this bird had to be euthanized. There was no way we could get this bird back into the wild. This greater flamingo, this was found on a Saturday morning, and there were already families around in the area, like enjoying, because you know it's August, it's summer, it's nice and warm. So there were people already out and about and enjoying their day. But then unfortunately someone shot this greater flamingo, and it landed in the water. And well, actually the EPU received this bird. They got it from the water, and also, yes, it was confirmed shot as well. So actually, sorry, just to mention, obviously the peregrine and the flamingo, and even actually the osprey, all of these were shot during the closed season. So there should have been no hunters around at this time. And then we also had this short-toed eagle, which was also picked up from Gozo, and this was on the 8th of October. This is after we had a small flock of short-toed eagles turn up. And it was a member of the public who found this one. Again, unfortunately, this one did not make it. It went into our rehab center, but it was too weak, and it died after a few days. So the figure of 210, these are only including the birds that we see physically in the hand, because these are ones that have been picked up by the public or you know, someone else, and they've been handed over to BirdLife or the police. But when you're in the countryside, you do also see signs of illegal hunting. So this is a pallid harrier that's quite clearly got a dangling leg. And whenever you see a bird like this with a dangling leg, it's another indication that this bird has been illegally targeted. And it's not just dangling legs. We also see birds with missing feathers in their wings as well. In this case, this is a hobby, and this was photographed last autumn. Both of these birds would struggle to complete their migration. These birds, in order to do their migration successfully, they have to be in top condition. They have to be in the best condition possible to make this journey. So this hobby with a wing like that, it's going to struggle. So I just wanted to draw on some of my personal experiences and ones that really stick in my mind. So the first is going back to August 2018, and it was the 10th of August, and we had 18 white storks turn up. And I remember sitting in the office and having a phone call come in from a member of the public, and he just said, like, yeah, there's 18 white storks. And when you hear that kind of news in Malta, you know that you have to go and find these birds as quickly as possible, because the risk of illegal hunting is so high that you need to make sure that you can follow them and try and prevent any hunting taking place. But unfortunately, by the time I had got to where they were reported, I had received another phone call from, this time it was a cyclist. And he was going through the countryside, and he spotted the white storks, and he'd never seen these birds before, but he automatically knew that it was something special and something rare. So he stopped to enjoy the birds. But just as he had done that, 3 of the white storks were shot down in front of him. Now, luckily on his helmet, he was actually wearing a small camera, so he managed to get some of the footage on it, including the hunter himself. He had the hunter holding one of the white storks. So anyway, he called me, and I managed to meet him as quickly as possible. But in order to meet me, he had to leave this area and come meet me on the road to lead me back in. And by the time we got back in, 2 of the dead white storks which he had seen, one of them had already disappeared. Presumably this hunter had come back to pick one up, and the other one was left lying in the field. Now, in Malta, there's quite a funny rule regarding private land and public land. The hunters can just put up signs wherever they want saying private, no entry. So we have to be really careful not to be seen to be trespassing, even though the chances are it's actually not private land at all. But anyway, this white stork had landed in a private field. So there's no way I could just walk into this field and pick up this white stork. So I called the police, and unfortunately they took a long time to arrive. They kept me waiting nearly 1.5 hours. And the cyclist who stayed with me the whole time kept saying, you know, you can go if you like, because this is a Friday night. I'm sure he had better things to do. But he stayed with me the whole time. We kept trying to get the police, and there was no response. And in the end, we actually had an off-duty EPU officer come just to pick up this bird, basically, because the police are the only ones who have the authority to access private land. And this 1.5 hours basically lost means that it could have been the difference between the police actually managing to find the hunter, because the cyclist saw where the hunter went. He could have had the white stork in his possession at this point. But anyway, 1.5 hours went by, and that opportunity was gone. And these 18 white storks, so they were reduced, of course, but then the coming days, they kept hanging around, and we saw the white storks fly out and they'd fly back in. And we had a theory that they had shot the adults on the first night, basically meaning that the ones left behind were juveniles who didn't know maybe where to go, but they knew Malta as a piece of land, basically. So when they tried to fly out to sea, maybe they got disorientated and they just kept coming back, basically. And then 5 days later, this is now the 15th of August, I had another phone call, this time from the government vets, and the police were bringing in some white storks. And they wanted me there because maybe they didn't know how to handle them, white storks, they could have been quite dangerous with their beak for all they know. So anyway, they called me in. These birds were both alive. Sorry, the right one had already died at this point, but the one on the left was alive. And yes, it's the first time I've ever handled a white stork. So to see it up close in this way was really quite distressing, actually. So this bird, unfortunately, was euthanized while I was holding it. So eventually we were down to just one remaining white stork. And yeah, after a few days, this bird was also never seen again. So of the 18 white storks, it's quite likely that none of them made it. Either they were continued to be shot, or the others just got so lost and disorientated that maybe they perished at sea. We don't know. We only know the ones that we had, which were confirmed shots. But yeah, so the hunter, in the end, they identified a suspect, the police, from the footage, but he was not found guilty of the white stork incident because they did not find a white stork in his possession, even though he did admit to actually having his gun on the day, and he got a €3,500 fine, a euro fine for that. And he also had his license confiscated for 2 years, which is obviously up now. But yeah, so he didn't get, he wasn't found guilty of actually shooting the white storks. So the next incident, which was quite a big one in my time here, was we had a greater flamingo, and it was picked up actually the same month I arrived here, which was August 2017. And unfortunately, before it came into our care, someone had got to the bird before us and had actually pulled some of the feathers from the wing, which basically meant that as soon as we released it into our nature reserve, which this is called Adira, we think that the feathers never actually grew back properly because this bird just never left. It became a resident, basically. And over the next year, it was basically acting as kind of a live decoy. So we had flamingos coming and joining this resident flamingo. And at one point we had 14 altogether, which is a record flock for Adira. And it was drawing a lot of positive attention from the public, and we were opening open days especially for people to come and enjoy these birds. But eventually every single flamingo left except for our resident. He was there all alone. And then unfortunately in November, the flamingo by this point was becoming a really nice pink color. And then in November, he just disappeared. And we thought for the first few days, maybe this bird had just migrated. But then when we did some patrolling of the nature reserve boundary, we found feathers. We found pink feathers, so obviously flamingo feathers. And then there was this fresh shotgun cartridge as well, right outside the boundary of the reserve. And there were also these fresh tire tracks. And then, and they also identified a possible entry and exit routes into the reserve. Now, we have watchmen who look at, they watch the reserves basically day and night, but no shots were heard. So the theory is that this hunter used a silencer and you didn't hear the shots. Unfortunately, no one was ever identified for this, but yeah, it was a real pity to lose this bird because we had all kind of, we'd grown used to him, and we were hoping that maybe in the future we'd have more flamingos come by and maybe even breed in the future. It's yeah, it's a shame because our nature reserve should be a safe place for birds. But in this instance, it wasn't. So I mentioned before, one of the main drivers for illegal hunting is taxidermy. A lot of these birds, they will fetch a lot of money on the black market. And you also have hunters themselves, maybe they've shot an osprey and they want it in their personal collection. So they will go to a taxidermist. And in Malta, there are, I think there are 12 licensed taxidermists, but there's also another 30 or so which are not licensed. And it's these unlicensed taxidermists which they're the main problem, because nothing is declared, and they will not only stuff the birds that have been illegally shot in Malta, but also from shots that, birds that were shot illegally overseas and then smuggled into Malta. One of the problems we have is with Maltese hunters actually going abroad to Egypt, and the birds will come back illegally into Malta, which will get stuffed and end up in collections like this. This is just one collection, and there are many, many of these across the island. Okay, so I've mentioned in my my role that I organise bird monitoring camps. So this just gives you an idea of a typical bird watching camp. This was Raptor Camp last year. These are some of my volunteers who came. They come in stages, so up to any time we can have maybe 15, 20, but we may have as few as 2 or 3, depending on when the season has, when the camp has started or ended. So we spend time in the countryside and just look for illegalities, basically, which we try to capture evidence of. We use small cameras like the one I'm holding in my hand, and any evidence that can be passed on to the police for the further investigation. Yes, we'll do that, and hopefully, as I say, it'll result in a positive court case. These camps are nice because you get to see areas of Malta which the typical tourist coming over would never see. And there are some really pretty places to see in Malta which tourists just probably have no idea exist. And even some of the Maltese. I've had Maltese volunteers join me, and I've taken them to areas in Malta and they just have no idea that they exist. So joining the camps is actually a really nice way to see the whole island. And you can have some really nice bird watching experiences as well. I've had days where I've seen like hundreds of harriers in the spring, or 1,000+ swallows going into roost during the autumn. It can be very good for bird watching. I'm just going to show you a quick video. So this is from spring 2020, when we were doing our spring watch operations, and this will just give you an idea about the illegal hunting of turtle dove.
Yeah, no, the other one is a turtle dove. You see?
Yeah.
Together.
I saw them together.
Yeah, look. Keep watching. Boom, shot down.
Yeah, it's him.
It's him?
Yeah.
Whoop! He shot it. He shot it. It landed in the field above.
He was behind the tree.
Okay,
There.
okay.
Oh. Yeah, he put something on
Yeah, yeah, it's a turtle dove. I can see the white. Okay. Yeah, there it is. Turtle dove.
That's it. Done for the day.
So, tell him to call police.
Okay, so yeah, that's just one incident of turtle dove hunting that we detected in the spring. But yeah, we have more, but see, I don't have the time to show you all, but this is just one example for you. So last raptor camp, so this was in September, on one particular day, we actually had two really rare visitors come here. The first is this lesser spotted eagle. And on the same day, we also had this black stork, and both the birds were seen at the same time at one point, but then they separated. And whenever a bird like this shows up, as I say, this is during raptor camp, so I had volunteers and I had teams, so I could ask a particular team to go follow the black stork, and I could have teams following the lesser spotted eagle. The lesser spotted eagle, we managed to follow until basically it roosted, but we only had a rough location of where it roosted. And if we had the exact location, we may call a night watch where we have volunteers actually stay the whole night watching this particular bird just to make sure that it survives the night, basically, because we do have illegal hunting going on during the night as well. We've had hunters with torches in the past go through fields where there's been roosting harriers, and they just shoot them during the night. So yeah, whenever we have a bird like this, which we know is of particular risk of illegal hunting for taxidermy, we have to follow them. But unfortunately, the lesser spotted eagle, I had teams the following morning all around where we thought the bird was roosting, but it was never seen again. And the same with this black stork. The site of this was also lost very quickly. And then a few days later, there was someone walking through an area in the north of Malta, and they found a really large black feather. So we have suspicions that this black stork was also shot. So this is another video. This is also from Raptor Camp last year. And yeah, this will basically show you a marsh harrier coming from a roost at the beginning, followed by some injured birds.
It's 15th of September, we're in the dirt tower.
There's more.
Just filming marsh harriers just start to take off. It's all.
Oh, we can hear shots.
It's down, it's been shot.
Maybe it is hanging because it's shot.
Oh yeah.
It's hanging.
Yes.
Record him if it's hanging.
Yes, I'm recording him. It's hanging.
Yeah, it's not tucked back, it's injured.
Yeah, I've trimmed this video down a lot. It's about 20 minutes long. So if you want thing, it's on YouTube. But I just wanted to again show you a small insight into what we captured during our camps. So another area that we investigate is bird trapping. And as part of the investigations that we carry out, we do these aerial surveys where basically I will go around in a small plane. I will be with one pilot, so it's a two-seater plane, and I'll just take pictures basically of all the trapping sites across Malta and Gozo. And this picture will just give you a tiny insight into how the countryside may look around the coastal areas, because mainly the trapping sites are on the coastal areas because the finches like to migrate around these areas the most. So yeah, my manager actually did a small, yes, he basically looked at all the trapping sites across Malta and Gozo, and he found that added together, the land is about the size of Valletta, which is the capital city. So a lot of land is lost just for these trapping sites. A lot are on garrigue, which is a very important habitat. So there's more damage caused than just taking birds from the wild. This is a typical finch trapping site set up, and this site actually has unattended nets left on the ground as well, which cause a threat to other animals. So for example, we found hedgehogs entangled in the nets, we found snakes, even other birds that come down and get traps like sparrows or pipits, for example. And when we investigate illegal trapping, we report the cases to the police. And if all goes well, the police will come and they will catch the trapper, and they'll also dismantle the whole site. So they'll take the nets, the poles, and of course the birds as well. This picture actually shows goldfinches, and there were also green finches in here as well. This was a police operation. All of these birds were smuggled into Malta from Italy. And there were, I think, I can't remember exactly, I think there were about 120 of them. And we ringed and released all of them back into the wild. So I mentioned in one of the earlier slides that electronic callers are illegal for the purposes of hunting and trapping, except for the finch trapping derogation. This is a video which I took last autumn of golden plover callers in the south of Malta.
It's the 26th of November 2020. This is down at Delamara Lighthouse. I'm at the trapping site at the very end. Clearly see a caller here. Callers all around.
So during the hunting and the trapping seasons, you will hear these electronic callers all across the countryside. And they're used because they're highly effective at drawing in species, the birds flying overhead, and they'll basically be, they'll think that there's more of their conspecifics down, and they'll feel like it's a safe area to come down. So they're used just to lure in the birds, basically. So you'll hear quite often golden plover and quail. I've even heard kind of obscure ones like herons, and yeah, it's very tricky to catch someone actually using this. I called the police for this, but by the time I met the police and guided them in, this caller had disappeared, and even the people were not found. And if they are found, it's quite a small fine. They only get 250 euros. So yeah, it's a really widespread problem. So we offer the injured bird recovery service and also the rehabilitation centre that we run. And then if all goes well, we also then release the birds back into the wild. So I mentioned there were 210 shot birds from 2020, and 21 of those birds we managed to release back into the wild, which is the equivalent of 44 birds. So it's not too bad, but unfortunately a lot of the birds that we pick up as the ones I showed you earlier, they face very little chance of being released back into the wild. So yeah, 21% we release back. Yeah, we pick up birds in all sorts of situations. So this is a marsh area that was picked up from a valley, and after we've picked up the injured birds, we take them to the government vets, and this is a bee eater. And you can see on the left wing, it's clearly sure it's got a gunshot injury, basically. The red dot is the x-ray, and all of the birds are x-rayed to look for signs of shots. And even though, you can look at this bird and you can know fairly sure, you can be sure that this bird was shot, but we need to get them x-rayed anyway, just to be 100% sure. And yeah, hopefully if all goes well, we release the birds back into the wild. So this is a merlin I'm holding just before it's being ringed. And here's the ring. And then, yes, this is the nice part of the job where we actually get to release birds back into the wild. So this is actually where I end my talk. And I want to end on a high note. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. So this video I'm going to show you is, I think it's one of the best examples of our rehabilitation work, because you'll see examples of birds that were shot and released, birds that were tired on migration, and you also see birds that were released back into the wild after being found on an illegal trapping site. So here we go. So yeah, just a small slide at the end to basically let you know how you can help us. So I realize it's maybe it's a lot of doom and gloom, and you're maybe thinking there's nothing much to do to help, but there is. So first of all, you can actually come to Malta. I don't believe that boycotting Malta is the best approach. If you want to help us, you can actually come and volunteer for BirdLife Malta and get involved with our Spring Watch or Raptor Camp. Secondly, if you really don't want to come to Malta, you can join us as a member or donate, because basically we need the support of the public in order to allow us to do the work that we do. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Alice. That was such a eye-opening account of what goes on in Malta concerning hunting. Harrowing at times, I'm sure that people will agree. But as you say, there are positive moments. I think what we're going to do, we will go to the Q&A fairly swiftly. So those watching in the future, i.e. on YouTube or what have you, and wondering where is the Q&A, well, if you become a member of the Urban Birder membership club, then you can see it all in its entirety. But before we actually go to that, let me just quickly ask you, what is your favourite bird, Alice?
Can I have 3? Sorry, it's a bit greedy, isn't it? Okay, if I had to pick one, I would go for the red kite, because for me, it's there's such a conservation success story, and whenever you go to Reading, you see red kites everywhere. So as soon as I'm back in Reading, the first thing I'm doing is looking for a red kite, and it doesn't normally take long. So yeah, I just love red kites basically, and it's really nice to see, for me, the comparison between how raptors are treated in Malta compared to how they're treated in Reading, where people actually put out food for them and they're flourishing basically. So yeah, red kites if I had to pick one.
Okay, and if you could be anywhere on this planet, notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be?
I'm going to give a really boring answer, and I'm going to say England, which is, I know, probably really surprising to a lot of people watching this who are stuck in England. But I haven't been there since December 2019, and I'd really like to go back again. Just,
Anywhere in particular? Reading, perhaps?
Well, if I had to choose in particular, I'd probably say the New Forest.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah.
All right, well, listen, before we say goodnight, I just want to tell all you Zoomers that coming up this Thursday, we have a really birdie night. It's with a guy called Silas Olofsson, who's been here before. He actually was here last year talking about birding in Mongolia. And on Thursday, he'll be talking about birding on the Faroe Islands, on which he lives. So that'll be a very interesting chat, because he's one of only a handful of birders in the whole series of islands that actually are out there watching birds, and he finds many rarities. So it'll be a very birdie chat. Next Monday, on Thursday the 11th of March, we have Joe Harkness here, he of Bird Therapy, and he'll be talking about how birding can help with your mental health. And the big moment for March will be on March the 18th, and we have the one and only Margaret Atwood here chatting all things natural history. Basically, hurry while stocks last in terms of tickets for that, because they're going fairly quickly. So if you haven't booked up, try and do it soon, because it's filling up. It's going to be a massive audience that night. Great. Okay, well, listen, Alice.
Yes.
Thank you very much for agreeing to come along and tell us the Malta story. And we're going to be doing a Q&A shortly, but thank you very much anyway for sparing your time today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. And Zoomers, all you Zoomers out there, thank you very much for coming along tonight, and I hope to see you again another night, and keep looking up.